What is up, guys? Welcome to a brand new video. So the new rank season is supposed to start in 2 days, so we're going to go over my top picks moving into it and also look at the biggest changes coming with it as well. Timestamps are going to be down below, but just before we get into it, two things. One, I'm going to give away some more RP, so comment down below, like the video if you do, to enter for $10 or whatever your region is. The second thing is I've actually got some merch available with a brand new design for the next week, which will ship in time for Christmas if you want to check that out. I don't do that very often, but links are down below if you want to grab some. We're going to break this up into roles, so if you want to skip to anything, that's fine. But first up is AD carry. Because the patch is so close now as well, it's really not likely anything here changes. There are two big changes, and the first one is Surveying. So a Q, the AD ratio is now 30 to 50% from 30 to 70%. This was basically reverting a change that happened a few months ago. The crits build is still going to be good, but it's going to be worse later on. You're not really likely going to one-shot people properly anymore. Honestly, I still think she's going to be really good. She is banned and picked an absolute ton right now and still performing really well. So she is definitely overpowered. Blade Through King has been buffed. It is a little bit better. Now Rage Raid as well would be better if you stick the two together. The other one is Varus. So actually his passive is getting reworked. It now scales with the attack speed that you have in your build. So it's 50% bonus for champions and 25% for non-champions, so like minions. It's going to last 5 seconds, and it's actually really kind of like a Jinx passive, just with bonus attack speed. Like, it's kind of the same way it works, at least. It means that crit and auto Varus is actually going to be back, and it's actually not that bad anyway. So I think this buff might tip him over the edge into back being viable. Essence Reaver for cooldown reduction and mana to poke is a nice middle ground, so it's kind of like what we're experiencing already with the heavy poke, but also just auto attacks hurt even more, and triple crit would also work. I like Varus anyway. He has his ultimate, which is really good in a team fight or setting up ganks. He has his poke, a great lane phase, high range. There's actually a lot of good stuff with Varus, and he might be coming back now, definitely in this patch. Apart from those two, Twitch is still going to be top tier. He actually has a mana cost increase on his W on the PB right now, but that's not really going to affect him too much. He's still just way too strong. He definitely is going to be the #1 AD carry. Apart from Twitch, Jhin is still really good if you go the crit build now, or a hybrid kind of crit build. I think he's actually definitely underrated. Well, he's still very popular, but he's just not performing as well as I think he should. Let's move on to the jungle very quickly. So not another role, but the Krugs now have had their experience changed. So the large one has the experience halved on the first clear. To put it into perspective, it was 178 experience from doing just red and Krugs. It's now 116 with these changes. So you don't get level 3 from just going red to Krugs. You aren't going to have the level 3 red gank like 2 minutes into the game, top or bot lane now. So thank God for that. That was one of the most horrible things I think I've ever experienced, getting ganked when I'm level 2 and the enemy jungler's level 3 with red buff. You're going to be back to needing 3 camps to hit level 3 now. So early gank junglers are going to take a little bit of a hit. Are we going to see like Rek'Sai, Lee Sin, Elise, Hecarim, anybody who wants all their spells to gank are going to be just a little bit worse. They're still going to be good though, because basically last patch they all had their win rates inflated because of this like level 3 gank. So they're back to kind of being normal, but still very strong. The other change is to the blue buffs. There's no more percentage AP, and the buff duration is up to 2 minutes. So it's nerfed to a mage's late game. Basically, they want to hit them as a group for a while now. Like Riot have said they wanted to hit them. So I think this is their way of doing it. It's going to be actually easier to play mid lane though for like our regular people. Like blue is a bit more valuable though, so junglers don't really want to take, well, they do want to take it because it's really good for their clear, but it's going to mean more to mid laners. It's actually just more of a mismatch. Like if you don't have it, but the opponent does have blue buff, now you have 2 whole minutes where you're kind of suffering in that matchup. So you do kind of want to give it to the mid laner now. Lux, Orianna, and Ahri are probably going to be the main ones hit with this because they just stack AP. It's like the high AP glass cannon champions that are really going to suffer from this. So let's move on to Keystones. Now, Fervor is the big one, actually. The stack duration is up to 6 seconds from 4 seconds now. The AD per stack is 1 to 8 from 1 to 6, which is 64 late game from 60. But maximum stacks has been lowered to 8 from 10. So remember, by the way, melee actually get 2 stacks per hit. So now there's 4 hits from 5. This is really big. Like all 3 of these things are individually getting a buff, right? The duration going longer means you can actually kind of, I guess, in the lane phase, like you can trade a little bit, you can exit, then you can go back in when you have more cooldowns, and you're still going to have the Fervor stacks. The AD, obviously getting more AD is just a nice thing anyway, especially late game. And the stacks like for ranged and melee are both going to be a buff. For ranged champions especially, it took forever to stack 10 times. Like you weren't ever really getting the full benefit unless in a really long team fight, especially not in the lane phase, but now you actually might hit that 8 stacks. For melee, just hitting 4 times is really good, especially when you build any kind of attack speed. So if you think about like Irelia or Yasuo, for example, who are hitting fast anyway, and now they only need 4 attacks, like that's a really big buff. So for AD carry, Twitch is going to be the first one. He uses the extra AD from the Fervor on his expunge, so that's going to be a buff for him. Sivir as well uses it with a W bounces. Varus, we've just said that he's going to be auto attacking more. he's building more bonus attack speed, which means you can stack it faster and then it buffs your Q and your E. Ezreal is probably one of the best AD carries to use this fervor anyway because he can apply it with his Q. Lucian as well can stack it faster with his passive and then use it on his Q damage. Like, it's actually a really big deal for Lucian. I think it's actually going to bring him back a little bit. Kalista is a kind of a question mark because she had some PvE changes, but they actually pulled them, so she's not getting any buffs this patch anymore because of this fervor one, because they think these fervor changes might actually buff her a lot anyway. For top lane, as I said, Irelia, Yasuo are probably the two biggest ones. Riven and Fiora also going to be using fervor a little bit more probably, though Riven can use Courage of the Colossus, though that is getting a nerf, which we'll get to in a second. For the jungle, Shyvana is probably the biggest one here. Shyvana is overpowered anyway, and now you're going to be getting these full AD stacks from just 4 autos when you dive in on someone in dragon form. It's actually kind of crazy. Jackson Nocturne could also be using this quite well, but it's always that like weighing up, do I want to take fervor or courage? And actually Courage of the Colossus is getting a nerf, so it's going to 5% max health now from 7%, and the cooldown is 45 seconds to 30 seconds. The cooldown is based on level, but actually it's not really the biggest issue. Like, the maximum health is going to hit tanks who use this and stack it, right? The cooldown is more for lane trading, so like Riven and Renekton, who use it to trade and not take any return damage. They can't do that as often now, so it brings both of those down a little bit at least, but it's not the biggest problem. It doesn't murder the Keystone. Rylais and Leandries, the combination is getting a big change as well. It's 100 gold cheaper for the Haunting guys and 600 gold cheaper for the Rylais because you lose 100 health, 25 AP, and it's now 20% slow instead of 40%. It's mainly a buff to support in my opinion. Like, you now buy Rylais for the slow really, and on supports it's cheaper, so you need less gold. The support meta might actually change a little bit, so it's not just redemption supports anymore. So like Brand, Zyra, Vel'Koz, Mosi, it just made them even more deadly mid game. Like, sure, Rylais is going to be worse, but the combination is still very strong, and they're more likely to have that mid game now. Some mids as well, like Vel'Koz or Kog'Maw, anyone with a constant poke can actually use that burn. Like, they might really screw their power spikes or kind of like speed them up. It's cheaper, so it's going to accelerate that. They get their items quicker, and you only have 6 slots though. So if you fill one with Rylais, which is a bit worse, late game you're going to have less AP. There is kind of like a trade-off, but if you remember Armpen, right, how that screwed up AD carries because some could stack it early then do super well earlier than everyone else. Well, guess what? It's kind of the same thing. It's only on some champions, but Vel'Koz is a good example of someone I could think could actually abuse this to spike harder like earlier. It's definitely a worse item, but there is a plus side for some champions. Singed, for example, like 20% slow you were getting already from poison because it's damage over time. It's now 600 gold cheaper. You can get better items sooner or other items sooner into the game. I'm pretty sure this guy is going to pop off big time now. So for top lane, not as much is changing. We're still going to see the same group of champions, but there are two things. So one, to Garen, if you're hit by 4 spins now, you lose 25% of your armor for 6 seconds. That kind of makes it the ultimate tank killer, especially if you get Black Lever as well. You're just going to ruin them. Like, you cannot duel a Garen anymore as a tank. Like, you stack armor and he's going to take it all the way anyway. There are still issues with him in fights, but 1v1 is going to be better. Like, tank meta is coming back a little bit, so he might have a spot. He's kind of like Annie, to be honest, though. He's very simple, but he's very effective. Now, AKALI is getting a big change, though, that has been kind of flying under the radar at the moment. The passive now works on towers, so it heals her, and then the next one does additional damage. This could be one of those really disgusting changes that breaks the game, actually, for AKALI. Like, Jhin and Vayne both became overpowered after their crit shot and their Q tumble worked on towers. You take them so much faster, and it's really hard to deal with, so late game now, AKALI is going to be a better split pusher, especially with the Lich Bane if you get that. Early, you're just more annoying, and it adds a bit more, I guess. I think she's already pretty decent, but finding it hard to fit into place in this meta at the moment where everything changes. But if you get ahead now, it's kind of game over. Like, you're going to dive a lot, right? And then goodbye towers as well. The cheaper Rylais might actually be a good thing for her. She doesn't really need the AP as much. She wants to stack items fast to get stronger as soon as possible because she's really strong in mid game, right? She doesn't want to play for late game. The jungle, again, in this patch, I think is going to be dominated by Hecarim, Shyvana, maybe even more now with the fervor if that's possible. She's already pretty busted, and Vi as well. There are lots of other good ones at the moment, but those are going to be the best, and I doubt that is going to change because we're seeing a couple of big changes, but not to those. Rengar is getting the percentage bonus AD from his passive. It's going to be 1 to 20% now from 2 to 30%. It kind of solves this thing I call the perfect game for Rengar, which is way too good. So if you just get lucky or you have a really good game, you manage to pick up loads of individual different kills and you get your passive stacked like straight away for all the bonus AD, it kind of ruins the rest of the game. Tank Rengar is not going to be as strong anymore because you're getting like few AD items, but it was giving you more from that bonus percentage. Also, just full AD Rengar is not going to be as strong because you're not buffing all that AD you have. The guaranteed crit, I think, is still going to be the problem. And if you get the Infinity Edge, you get it for the bonus damage. You don't need crit chance, which makes Infinity Edge so much more efficient on Rengar than like any other champion. I still think it's going to be top tier. And another one that I still think is going to be top tier is actually Ivan. He's getting his mana cost up by 20 and the slow reduced from 40 to 70 from 70%. The more time that passes, the more I'm convinced he actually is probably broken. Like, he's an early game god. It's harder to play later actually and have an impact, I think. It's kind of like a lease. I don't think this is going to be enough to like take him out of the meta completely, but not quite as strong early. Someone who has mastered Ivern though is really, really scary. It's really hard to play against a good Ivern. Finally then, for the mid lane, mages are all going to get a bit weaker with Rylais and the blue changes, right? Some will be hit more than others, but overall, no matter what you really build, I think it is going to be slightly worse. It might mean AD mids come back a little bit actually, but also just Rod of Ages champions. Like, they're going to get better now because as a health item, it's rather than Rylais, right? So if you build Rod of Ages, it's still a really effective item. It hasn't been changed when the alternatives have been nerfed. The Bonk is getting some changes. Her Q damage has been increased, but the wave clear is worse and your E damage is down as well. But she is still legit like my top pick right now for mid. She is so strong and really hard to stop her once she gets rolling. She can just one-shot burst that nobody really else can keep up with. The outplay potential is still really high once you've learned what you're doing, and blue buff might hurt a little bit actually, but really like you're going to be able to spam more in the lane phase for an extra 30 seconds, and that's when you're strongest anyway. I think you're going to be able to roam a ton. Wave clear might be the only bigger issue here actually, so we'll have to see about that one because it is lower and I don't know if that's going to screw her big time. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think. Remember to comment down below, pick yourself up some merch if you want to buy some of that and support me as well. Thank you very much for watching, but for now, let's go to the robots.